Hello everyone, this is Aussies Elect and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm finally doing a aftermath video of the House of Representatives election for the 2025 Australian federal election. I apologize in the delay of videos. I have been a bit unwell this past week. So we've got to a point where almost all of the seats have been declared. Only 4 are in doubt according to the ABC, and the ones that are in doubt according to the ABC are Corwell, Flinders, Bradfield, and Longman. With the case of Bradfield and Longman, at this point, it's just that these seats are basically just sort of too close to call. Like here in Bradfield, there's like a 60 vote gap between the two candidates. This one was actually called on Monday for the Liberal, but then the ABC have uncalled it because preference flows apparently had been particularly good for Nicolette Bully. There, the Liberal Party primary vote is quite low, 38%. They got like a 5.4% swing. So on that primary vote, I really didn't predict that it would be too tough for the Independent to actually win that seat off of the Liberal Party. So I still think this one's definitely in play for the Independent. As for Longman, this one's also really close. The gap here is only 200 votes. In Flinders, I'm not exactly sure why they haven't called this one yet. I think that the Liberal Party primary vote is actually like pretty high here. It's 41.3%. I mean, I guess they're just sort of waiting on preference flows here, but it's likely that probably the Liberals will win that one. And then the final seat is Corwell. This one is a mess. Yeah, the others vote is 10% higher than the Labor Party vote. There's like 5 independent candidates in the seat, and 3 of them are over 7%, with 2 of them over 10%. And then you've also got the Greens here. Really complicated seat, and this is, I'd say, would be the last one that gets called because we don't even know what the 3 candidate preferred is going to be, let alone the 2 candidate preferred for this seat. But they think it's probably not going to be Labor versus the Liberals because the voters of those independent candidates will likely preference each other. I will note here that the poll bludger has called at the moment less seats than the ABC. There's a couple more seats that they have in doubt. I just want to quickly go over them. One of them is Grey, which was previously on this 3 candidate preferred list by the AEC. There were seats where they were counting the 3 candidate preferred. I assume they've already finished that and they've decided that the Independent is not going to be in the 2 candidate preferred. I think they were leading earlier in the count, but then more votes came in for Labor from Whyalla or something, and it knocked out the Independent, so it's just going to be a Labor versus a Liberal count. I'm not exactly sure, but it was on this list before. Now it's gone. Fisher was an interesting one because the LNP were looking in trouble for a while, but now their vote on the 3 candidate preferred is up pretty high, and I doubt that one of these would be able to overtake that, even if it was the Independent that managed to make the 2 candidate preferred count, which looks like they're slightly behind. And then Forrest was another one. I mean, this isn't a primary vote, so, you know, like, this is probably possible that they could undertake, but again, the Independent has to get into the 2 candidate preferred, and currently they're behind by, it looks like, about 600 votes. Hunter, Labor Party easily makes a majority, and same as Blaxland as well. And then Cornwall isn't on this because I assume it hasn't even entered the 3 candidate preferred stage yet. So yeah, there's a couple of seats. Bean is also on here just because I think it's just really close, but presumably the ABC thinks that the Independent can't catch the Labor Party here. And yeah, the poll bludger also sort of believes the same thing. I want to go over a couple of contests and just sort of explain what happened. A lot has been made of these Greens seats in Brisbane that were lost to the Labor Party, and I just want to confirm what a lot of other people have already confirmed. It wasn't really because the Greens had a huge, massive swing against them. I mean, they had a little bit of a swing against them, but it was mostly just because the Liberal National Party made it into the 2 candidate preferred with the Greens last time, and that was how the Greens were able to win. Whether it's the Greens or the Labor Party in a seat like Griffith, they would beat out in the 2 candidate preferred against the LNP. But the problem was that the Liberal National vote dropped so much that the Labor Party were able to make it into the 2 candidate preferred. This time they easily had the highest primary vote out of the 3. And then because Labor made it into the 2 candidate preferred, Labor was going to win because people who voted for the Liberal National Party in the 3 candidate preferred voted for Labor. I just realized actually that Brisbane, it was actually the case that the Greens got beaten out on the 3 candidate preferred. Actually, it looks like that the Labor Party increased their vote, and yeah, were able to stomp the Greens. So that actually went pretty much what a lot of people were talking about would happen with the Brisbane, where the Labor Party would just beat out the Greens on first preferences, and then they would win the seat. But yeah, Griffin was a little bit different. And then Ryan, the Labor Party primary vote did increase, but sort of didn't increase enough to beat out the Greens on the 3 candidate preferred here. So they were up 6%, the Greens down 1.5%, but just not enough to actually beat them out on the 3 candidate preferred, and that's how the Greens were able to win the seat. And there was actually like a light swing away from the LNP in the seat of Ryan. So Labor came really close to actually winning Ryan, but yeah, it's the kind of seat where I guess you have a lot of sort of where you have either like Tories or tree Tories, and so that's how the Greens were able to hang on to that one. But of course, like in a seat like Melbourne, this one obviously just swung to the Labor Party away from the Greens. It's kind of less complicated. Like obviously the coalition were never going to enter the 2 candidate preferred in this one. It's just there was a big swing away from the Greens. Look, minus 5.8%, and this is after the redistribution as well, I believe, plus 5.9% to Labor. So yeah, clearly there was a anti-Greens swing in Melbourne and I guess Brisbane as well, and it went to Labor. But Griffith, I think, is a bit more complicated because there's that interesting sort of 3-corner contest. And Melbourne, I'm not exactly sure what led to this big swing away from the Greens here. I mean, people have talked about like the anti-Semitism thing, or them siding with the CFMEU, or them blocking party legislation. I think it has a little bit to do with that last one, in my opinion, but maybe the CFMEU stuff, I don't know. But also, it could just be that a lot of sort of maybe like poor renters in this area sort of just left and went back and like lived with their parents, and the Greens voters here were replaced with like yuppies who vote Labor or something like that. Because if we go on to how the Greens actually did on the national vote, like they've stayed pretty stagnant. So it's almost like the Greens voters have just sort of like moved territories rather than actually like there's been a real decrease in support for the Greens. Just quickly, another theory that I heard about Melbourne was that voters in Melbourne didn't quite understand the electoral system and they voted for Labor in order to stop Dutton. So they thought that like if they voted for the Greens or something, like it might help Dutton to win. I mean, I guess they were right in that like if the Greens won the seat, it'd be less chance of Labor having majority. But I think like the implication is like they thought that if they voted for the Greens instead of Labor, that the Liberals might win the seat. I don't know. People can be pretty irrational when it comes to voting and not really understand things. So maybe that theory holds some water. But it sort of rests on the idea that like voters are particularly afraid of Dutton and not necessarily as afraid of Tony Abbott or Scott Morrison. So maybe Dutton is particularly scary. I expected that the Greens would do better at this election because of, you know, the rental and housing crisis and because of like opposition to like AUKUS and stuff like that. So I honestly think that, you know, even if the Greens had a status quo result in the primary vote, I think it is a bit of a poor showing for them. I think they should have done better this election. I know like climate change is less of like a salient issue and stuff like that, but they did seem to sort of adapt to that. They try to make their campaign about other issues such as like dental and of course housing. So the fact that they have basically stayed pretty much the same on primary vote and then they've lost seats, yeah, it's not a great election for them. But clearly, dismal election for the coalition, as everyone else has said, and then pretty decent election for the Labor Party, 34.6%. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter and everywhere going like, I can't believe the Labor Party won this massive majority on 34.6%. Clearly there's something wrong with our voting system, and if we had first past the post, this would be so much better. No, if we had first past the post. Have you looked at like the UK election where the Labor Party there got like 33% and then they won this like really massive majority? No, first past the post would not solve this issue. This is just an issue of, more than anything, having single member electorates, which I don't think is necessarily the best idea. I've proposed a reform to how I think the electoral system should be, and I will get to that follow-up video soon, by the way. Anyway, I digress. So I want to take a look at sort of some more interesting results. Obviously, the Labor Party massively won inner and sort of like mid-suburban areas. I guess you would call like this kind of area like outer suburban areas. But Labor did all right in outer suburban areas. Like they didn't get like swings against them in like Dunkley or Holt or Bruce or Gorton. They got like, I think, a very slight swing against them in Hawke, which was the one seat that I said, the Labour Party might have to worry about. And then like McEwen, there was the swing to the Labour Party there, which was one that like a lot of people were saying like, oh, Labour's going to lose this seat. What else we had? Like Patterson, a 4% swing to Labour. Macquarie, a swing to Labour. Gilmore, a 5% swing to Labour, which was like the one where I was expecting was like if any seat was going to go to the coalition, it would be Gilmore. Ida Monaro, some people reporting Labour be in trouble there. 1.1% swing to Labour. Corangamite, 0.2% swing to Labour. So yeah, Labour had a really good night and they massively overperformed polls. That's why my prediction was so wrong, especially my last prediction. My second last prediction wasn't too bad, actually, the one I did a week before the election, and I kind of got spooked by some of those sort of last polls, and that's why I sort of changed my prediction to make it sort of a more minority government prediction. But I will do a video about the polls and how sort of accurate they were, but obviously the most accurate of all the polls was that YouGov MRP, which gave Labour 84 seats, and everyone sort of scoffed at that YouGov MRP when it came out because they're like, oh, this is way too much. How ridiculous is this? But yeah, YouGov really would be patting themselves on the back. That was actually a massive poll win. Obviously, it did underestimate Labour, but it still predicted seats that Labour would pick up, like I believe it was Banks and it was Bonner, and those were two sort of surprises, and it predicted both of them. So what was even more surprising, of course, was seats like Ford and Petrie, which I think Labour did hold during the Rudd years, but that's Rudd was a Queenslander and 2007 was a different time. After that state election, most people assumed that like any kind of stronghold Labour might have in Queensland has been lost, but seats which during the state election swung to the coalition, like Leichhardt, swung like 10% to Labour. I know there was a retiring member, but damn. Seats I thought could be picked up by the Labour Party, like Braddon, like there was a small chance, 15% swing to the Labour Party. Bass, like even with the personal vote of Bridge Archer, 9% swing to Labour. Lyons, everyone was expecting this one was going to be marginal, 10% swing to Labour. Franklin, yeah, that independent didn't sort of do amazingly, but it was always going to be difficult for this one to win when the Liberal Party was directing preferences to Labour over this independent. And then you got like Sturt, 7% swing to Labour. Boothby, 8% swing to Labour. Western Australia, looks like Labour have won both Bullwinkle and Moore. I was thinking like maybe one will go to Labour, one will go to the coalition in my most recent prediction. Looks like both did, but I did predict that both would go to Labour in the prediction before that. So that's something actually consistent with my Tasmania video where my 1 week out prediction is the most accurate. So maybe I should follow whatever I'm predicting 1 week out and not listen to anything closer to what I'm thinking on the day of the election. So some notable things, the Chinese community really swung to the Labour Party. Like Chisholm, okay, it's kind of moderate, but we thought that sort of the swing would be against Labour's favour in Victoria because of the whole position of the state government. And I believe in Bendigo, where Labour Party just hold on, and there was like a 9% swing or something to the coalition there. The National Party did really try to make this seat sort of like a referendum on the state Labour leader, Jacinta Allen, because she's from this area of Bendigo. So there was an attempt in some places to really connect Labour to the unpopularity of state Labour in Victoria. It seems to have only sort of sparsely worked. But it wasn't just sort of like Chisholm where like Chinese Australian vote defiantly swung to the Labour Party. Like these seats here, Aston, Menzies, Deakin, I believe have a significant Chinese community. And so does Tangney in WA, which swung 4% to Labour. So does Banks, which was a surprise Labour win. So does Bennelong, which was a 9% swing to Labour. Reid as well, which was a 6.6% swing to Labour. So Chinese voters clearly weren't very happy with Dutton. I mean, I think at the very least, the Chinese ship fiasco really backfired on Dutton. Look, I really did think that Dutton was able to connect to a lot more people than he actually was able to connect to. I personally didn't like Dutton, but I also really didn't like Scott Morrison either. So I just thought, maybe this dislike I have of Dutton is only sort of something that I see in my social circles. But even Queenslanders in his area swung massively to Labour. And I guess like some of this might have something to do with him ditching Queensland during the floods. Like there was sort of talk about whether or not that would have an effect on him in some of these Brisbane seats, and the polls weren't showing there were. There were some polls of these kind of seats, and they were showing like, I don't know, pretty status quo result. But yeah, like look, damn, like there's some serious swings to Labor here in these seats. Just generally, Queenslanders looked at Dutton and said like, yeah, well, you know, he's one of ours, but he's not what we are. I really didn't expect the Labor Party to make gains in Queensland. I said that Queensland would probably be a status quo result. I was completely wrong about that. I just expect Queensland to never change. Like, I just thought after Rudd, Queensland was just sort of done for the Labor Party. And so this was a big surprise to everyone. Biggest surprise was definitely what happened in Queensland. I did say, I think a little bit before, that Hughes might be in play, and I sort of scoffed at that same idea later on. Labor Party winning some of these like New South Wales seats, I'm not incredibly surprised about. And even Aston was one that in my first prediction video back in September, I predicted that the Labor Party would hold. I thought Keith Wallahan's personal vote would save him in Menzies, but I think he'll probably be back next time when, you know, presumably there's going to be a swing against the Labor Party. So generally, I think also that the Teals, they did well, but I think they kind of underperformed, to be honest. I was expecting that we would get sort of more surprises. Like I was thinking like a seat like Bean, where the independent was looking good for a while. I thought we would see more seats like this, where a shock sort of independent would get really close to winning the seat or would win the seat. But it looks like the independents, you know, in total are going to go backwards. Like Goldstein, I can't really say exactly what pushed people to vote for Tim Wilson. You know, there's a lot of people, you know, talk about like the Jewish vote and stuff like that. Like the Jewish population in Goldstein, you know, it is significant. It's like 7% or something. I don't know. Maybe some of them swung to the coalition, picked up this one. But yeah, Bradfield, the independent, probably not winning. That's a bit of a surprise. Cowper, a lot of polls were pointing to the independent having a good chance here. It looks like the Nats might actually get a swing towards them here. Calais, yeah, this is one that I thought would actually get picked up by Andrew G. And it looks like there was no sort of discussion about whether or not Kate Hook was going to make the 2 candidate preferred. Yeah, it looks like she's pretty far behind. She did make it to the 3 candidate preferred though. So yeah, I did say if Andrew G makes the 2 candidate preferred, he'll probably win the seat, and that looks to have happened. So that was a win for independents. But everywhere else, it's looking like probably the major parties are just going to hold on to wherever the challenge is. The independents behind in Bean, Bradfield. I don't think one's going to win in Forest or Fremantle. That's already been called, but it was pretty close. Flinders. Corwell is going to be, you know, we know that one's going to be weird, but I think probably the independent's not going to win there because of, you know, there's just going to be like a lack of, you know, preference discipline and stuff like that. Franklin, of course, and then Grey, where it looks like they're not making the 2 candidate preferred. Oh, and then of course like Wannon as well, where the independent again got a swing against them. Oh, I also forgot about Monash, where it looks like probably Deb Leonard won't make the 2 candidate preferred either. It was another one on this list which was removed. Yeah, I think Deb would have a much better chance of potentially winning the seat than the Labor Party candidate, especially as the Liberal Party candidate only got like 32%. I will note though that Russell Broadbent, who I thought would win the seat, got like 10.3%. So clearly, like, deciding not to take money from anyone didn't really help him. Like, it was a decent showing, but I think, you know, especially as this is probably going to be their last hurrah because of those spending caps. Well, last significant hurrah. I think, you know, this is sort of not the best result for independents. I was really expecting this election we might see like the genuine end of the 2-party system. And I think maybe the Liberal Party, like they were pretty upset about this loss, but the reason why they were so conciliatory and they didn't look too angry is I think that they were actually kind of happy that a lot of these independents were stopped in their tracks. Like I have a feeling that they really cared a lot more about, you know, preventing seats going to independents or winning back seats from independents like in Kooyong and Goldstein than they cared about losing seats to Labor. That's the vibe I really got from the coalition this election. It just really seems like they're way more afraid of the independents and these third parties, and of the Greens, of course, as well, than they are of Labor. And the cynic in probably a lot of you probably just says like, oh, they like the uni party, they like the duopoly. It creates just an easy sort of enemy for them to, you know, target everything in the Labor Party. They don't have to battle on all these different fronts. Like, I mean, that's a fair enough sort of like observation to make, that whole situation. Yeah, the Labor Party might have won this election, but I generally think the big winner of this election was the 2-party system. It's how my prediction, I think I mostly got wrong. I thought there'd be maybe like 14 independents. We're lucky to get like 10 at this point. The Greens, you know, did pretty abysmally. They came pretty close in wills, actually, but yeah, that's still a loss. The Greens, I don't think they'd made the two candidate preferred in like Adelaide or like Perth, which is what I was expecting might happen. And it looks like also, I mean, I did talk about the Senate quite a bit in my most recent video, but it looks like the Labor Party is probably going to be making all the gains in expense of the coalition in the Senate. I'll just briefly sort of go over what's changed. I still think One Nation has a chance in New South Wales. Like, ABC is still saying Labor's likely, but I still think One Nation's in with a chance here. Same as in Victoria, just because the Greens still need like a little bit of vote and there's a bit of a surplus for the coalition here. I still think One Nation has a chance in Victoria, and then like Rennick is still in with a chance in Queensland, but it's probably more likely that Malcolm Roberts will get up there for One Nation. WA, I still think probably it's more likely the Labor Party will get 3 seats here. SA, yeah, Labor Party is going to win 3 seats here. And then Tasmania, I'm seriously worried for Jackie Lambie at this point, because I think that probably the Liberal Party will win a second seat because their quota has gone up a little bit. And then the Labor Party are only just behind Jackie Lambie. But one would think that Lambie would attract some of these sort of minor party protest votes. Yeah, I don't know how safe Jackie Lambie is in Tasmania. Yeah, it really feels like a big win for the major parties. I mean, the Liberal Party, yeah, they had a pretty shocking loss, but they can come back from here after, you know, a term or two. They don't need to start like worrying about like random other seats like Flinders and stuff, having to win them back from independents, and just focus like purely on attacking the Labor Party. It just makes things just a little bit sort of easier for them, in my opinion. So yeah, this video was a little bit of a mess, everyone, just sort of all over the place, but I just wanted to give my sort of thoughts on the election. It was a big surprise, landslide for the Labour Party, as everyone's been talking about. Looks like the Liberal Party have done the worst since the beginning of its founding. Labour Party don't look like they're doing as well as John Howard at this point. He got like 94 out of 148 seats in 96, and looks like Labor's probably going to get about 94 as well out of 150. So probably a higher two-party preferred than John Howard, but not as much of a proportion of seats. I think the next election is going to be less about sort of cost of living as a whole and more about immigration and housing. That's my guess. If I were Labor, I would go to an early election on a whole suite of tax reforms, a la John Howard in 1998 with the GST, to sort of actually get a mandate to pass a bunch of tax reforms. Because, yeah, as the News Corp media keeps on saying, I think one of the News Corp guy in Insiders, the first day after the election, said if the Labor Party, you know, just changes things in the middle of the term, they're going to be seen as untrustworthy because they didn't put it to the people first. I don't know if the voters will actually care that much, because they didn't seem to care about the stage 3 tax cut changes, but I feel like the Labour Party would feel that they would need a mandate if they're going to do stuff with, you know, those housing tax reform stuff. So I'm predicting that could definitely happen early election. Maybe those independents who only just lost in the seats they were going for could have sort of another chance, if they have the money, of course, by that stage. And if like the Liberal Party has like weakened even further than it has at the moment. I know Susan Ley was elected for the Liberal Party leadership today. David Littleproud was re-elected for the Nationals. I don't think that team is going to be particularly great. I think Susan Ley trying to move the Liberal Party to a more moderate stance is going to be a bit of a headache for her, in my opinion. I don't think that there's going to be much party unity on that. I mean, maybe in front of the cameras, but behind the scenes, definitely not. You know, there's a big sort of MAGA crowd at the moment in the Liberal Party, and they're not going away, and they're probably not going to sit silent. So that's my observations, guys. Big sea of red here, as we can see. Congratulations to the Labour supporters on my channel for the big win. And this will certainly not be the last you'll hear of me. I do want to do a video on polling, as I said, and I will sort of relate that to my predictions and how it compared to the final result, and sort of also why my predictions were pretty off. I also want to do definitely sort of a video talking about how Conservatives have reacted to the results. There's been a lot of sort of cope and allegations on Twitter. It's very interesting. And I believe probably I'm going to be doing a discussion video with Saw Monsoon and we will talk very much about like where the Liberal Party goes from here, where the Labor Party goes from here as well, where the Greens go from here, where Climate 200, Simon Holmes a Court goes from here, all of that kind of stuff. But for now, thank you for watching, everyone, and thanks again to everyone who attended my live stream the other week for the election. It was a very good time. Goodbye. Oh, before I go, I just realized that the Labour Party has successfully made it to the two-candidate preferred in Mayo. At least the AEC is starting to ask for that to be counted now. So that's pretty interesting. That's one thing that I can tick off the bingo card that I had. Yeah, I will do an update on that bingo card once everything has been counted, because there's a lot of things that really need everything to be fully counted before we know exactly how that's going to end up. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone.